Thank you so much for coming. This space also is to share a little of what happened in May 2025 with a beautiful 25 people group that we had down in Cuba. So we have Witness for Peace Solidarity Collective, and we are an organization that builds transnational grassroots of solidarity to resist violence, poverty, and oppression in the US and Latin America and the Caribbean. And right now, this is an opportunity to share what we do in the Caribbean, in the specific case of Cuba. As Witness for Peace Solidarity Collective, we are against the blockade and the occupation of Guantanamo Bay and the naval base and prison that currently political economic context in Cuba generates an economic crisis. And we are just part of this group of people that want to raise our voices and share experiences and share what we learned about how the blockade affects the daily life of Cubans. So with us, we have three presenters tonight. Sierra Reyes, Ashley Daniels, and Ben Michi. They are three wonderful people that are part of resistance in terms of gender, race, and environment, which was the topic of the delegation. So their interests were, I expect, were fulfilled within this delegation, and their expectations of being here tonight with us and their expectations on the delegation, I hope they fulfill their expectations. So with us, Sierra will share about the topic of gender, Ashley will share about the environment topic, and Ben will share about the race topic that we covered throughout the delegation. So with us, Sierra. Oh, sorry. The Drinking Center is our main partner in Cuba, and is an macroecumenical organization that has worked over 30 years there in Cuba, and is a non-religious organization, but its based is on the Baptist church down there in Havana. And they offer their space for us, and they are, or as I said, our biggest partner there in Cuba, besides other partner organizations that we work with. So now with us, Sierra.
Hi, everybody. Like Felipe said, my name is Sierra. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and I am currently living in Atlanta, Georgia. And I, went on the delegation in May, and it was my first time going to Cuba. I have known people that have gone on delegations, and so I was really excited to join this one. In Atlanta, I do work in the reproductive justice movement. I work at an abortion fund in like the Deep South, and do like primarily most of my like activism work in that movement. So I was really excited to see gender and like healthcare kind of as a topic of this delegation. So that is kind of mainly what I was going to talk about for like the gender portion. So I think, Jessica, you can go to the next slide. And so something that we learned about when we were meeting with family doctors, which I guess on the slide before that, there's a little picture in the corner of me and the family doctor and the family nurse that we met in Cuba. And we learned a lot about family medicine there. And they also taught us about the maternal and infant healthcare program in Cuba, which I thought was super interesting just because of, I think, like the stark difference in the care that is given to like women and children in Cuba versus here in the United States, and like especially here in the US South. And so there's two pictures on this slide that I'll talk about really quick first. And so the first one, kind of like at the top, is the family doctor consultation office, and it's also the apartment of the family doctor and nurse. And so every neighborhood in Cuba has a family doctor and a family nurse that is just like their kind of like their primary care doctor. And they visit with them throughout the year to just like take care of those people in the neighborhood. And so the maternal and infant health program is part of that program, and this addresses women and infants of reproductive age. And so, in the same way that the families in the neighborhoods that the doctors serve are kind of categorized and grouped based on different like risk levels and things like that, pregnant women are also kind of classified in that way based on the risk of their pregnancy. And then they will be able to meet with their family doctor and then other specialists, like more or less throughout the time that they're pregnant and then after they give birth as well. Um, and so even though someone might see a family doctor more or less based on the risk of their pregnancy, pregnant women do meet with the doctor basically like weekly throughout the whole time that they are pregnant, which is really, really great. And then something also that was really interesting is that Cuba has special hospitals and homes for pregnant women. And so all people give birth in maternity hospitals, and that is the other picture that is on this slide, just like a hospital totally dedicated to that. And people often go there right before they give birth, around 39 to 40 weeks of pregnancy. And then something that many of us, I'm sure, wish that we had in the United States. Women start a paid maternity leave in Cuba when they are 34 weeks pregnant. So, like before they even give birth. And then after they give birth, they take a 1 year mandatory fully paid leave to be able to like be with their child because there's like so much there's like so many things that happen in that really early stage of birth, and like so many reasons why when like parents can stay with a child and like stay at home and not have to go like straight back to work. Like a lot of I think like a lot of stress can be alleviated when there is just that like mandatory period, and you know that you have like a year to visit with different doctors and like be with and like raise a family. You can go to the next slide. And so, like I said, I work in abortion and reproductive justice here in the United States. So I was also curious about that in Cuba. Um, and so access to abortion, contraceptives, and sex education are also covered in this health program. Um, Cuba was the first Latin American country to decriminalize abortion, and abortion is legal and widely accessible in Cuba, which is also a big difference. Um, here in the United States and especially in the South, that kind of reproductive care is super restricted and really, really challenging for people to access because it's either like not legal or available in their states, or it's expensive. They have to travel. There's like often a lot of other barriers that come into play there. And so in the maternal health program, because it addresses people of reproductive age, um, people's desire to like be pregnant or not to be pregnant is something that they talk about with their doctors. And so if they do want to be pregnant, they are given prenatal care and different kinds of like health education. And then if they don't want to be pregnant, they're also given that option. And so there's kind of like an all options counseling and like a comprehensive sort of sex education that happens there as well, as opposed to just like in the South, it's very common to just, abstinence-based sex education, if you even have sex education. And so family doctors can also provide IUDs and condoms, so contraceptive care like that. Um, Family doctors primarily deal with like preventative medicine, and so gender affirming care isn't provided by family doctors at the primary level because it's not preventative medicine, but Cuban citizens do have access to gender affirming care that is also free in Cuba, which makes it the first Latin American country to provide that kind of care for free as well, which was really, really cool. Um, I think that's the last slide that I have, and I do want to give it over to Ben and Ashley to have more time to talk about race and the environment. But this learning about like this program was really like touching to me because I think it really highlighted how much of an emphasis like life and having the ability to have life and like raise families and have the support and the care to do that, like how there's a really big emphasis on that in Cuban society. And it was really, really like inspiring to see what things could be like um, in a place that just like gives people care that they deserve because they are people and like no other reason. Um, so yeah, this was like a really like moving, like I said, moving experience for me to learn about, and it's something I truly do think about like every single day when I go to work. So thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Ashley Daniels. I live in Durham, North Carolina. I use she, her pronouns. I have a background in environmental justice organizing, both as a volunteer and then later in my work. And so that is the work that I do. Much like Sierra, when I saw this delegation come up, I was like, oh, like this was meant to be. So gonna talk to you all a little bit tonight about the environment. If we can go back to the last slide just briefly. Um, I want to start by saying Cuba is a paradise. It is not a utopia. It is not a perfect society, but it's a beautiful country with diverse people and rich culture and developments in medicine and policy and society that people in the US could greatly benefit from. It is difficult for Cubans to get access to cars and food items. It is difficult for Cubans to get access to menstrual products and adequate medicine for their people. And for reference, I want to invite everyone to think back to the early days of the COVID pandemic in the US. And as word began to spread about the implications of the pandemic, people began to go into a panic. People cleared the shelves of stores. People hoarded toilet paper. When shoppers went to go grocery shopping, they found empty shelves. And everyone was gravely concerned that their basic needs would not be met. Now imagine if people in the US had to endure this level of uncertainty for 6 months, or 1 year, or 6 years. Again, the blockade in Cuba, the US has been enforcing that for over 60. Despite these odds, we had such a great impression of the country. Much of what Sierra was mentioning about their care for families, their ability to provide education to their people, healthcare for their people. Two of our folks got sick at that time and needed care and received care with no problem. So just want to give that context going into this conversation about environment. We can go to the next slide. So we ate really well. We had fresh food. There were mango and coconut trees everywhere. Lots of produce stands on every corner. We were served fresh guava, squash, soups, mango, and cucumbers with almost every meal. We visited an organic farm that grew herbs, vegetables, and plants for the home. We asked them about pesticides, and they told us that most farmers don't use them. Some people choose to be organic, and even people, if they wanted to use pesticides, due to the blockade, they're very difficult to get and very expensive. The farm used companion planting and other integrated pest management systems to keep pests from overtaking their crops. Access to seeds is also difficult. Most of the seeds from the US are coated with neonicotinoids and other harmful pesticides. So transporting seeds into Cuba is prohibited unless it's approved by the Ministry of Agriculture. Go to the next slide. I put this picture here because I got really, really happy all the time when I would see the trees in Havana. Um, I think these are like a ceiba tree and like a type of ficus. Um, yeah, the trees left such an impression on me. One, because I don't see this type of tree in the US. And then the other reason is because a lot of the cities that I've visited in the US try to keep like a very like uniform aesthetic to the trees. And these just had so much character and were able to just be natural. So I thought the trees were definitely worth a mention. You can go to the next slide. So much of the Cuban culture we experience was nature-based. Cuba is of course surrounded by water. A lot of the buildings had open air courtyards, and we were outdoors for many of the restaurants and businesses that we visited. And everyone in our delegation got intimately acquainted with the Cuban heat. Um, and many Cuban people have kept the religious traditions of their ancestors who honor nature-based deities. A few of these are pictured here. Yemaya, the goddess of the upper ocean. Olokun, the god of the lower ocean. Shango, god of thunder and lightning. And Ogun, the blacksmith god of iron and war, who is said to have carried the other Orisha from heaven to earth on his back. These religious practices have traveled and adapted from Asete and Ifa, from Yoruba ancestors in Africa to Santeria, Halomayombe, and the all-male society of Abakawa in Cuban culture. Rituals to honor these deities integrate community and the natural world. And go to the next slide. Yeah, the last thing I want to talk about is like what is clearly man-made distress. Yeah, our first night in Cuba, we drove down the streets with completely dark houses. And this is when we learned that neighborhoods experience scheduled blackouts due to the lack of fuel. There are also unscheduled blackouts. Those happened about 2 to 3 times a day. Trash was piled on the street corners because without adequate fuel, the trucks couldn't service their neighborhoods, and people had to live with it in their communities. Outdated infrastructure and fuel shortages impact water access as well. Less so for people in Havana, but Cubans living outside the city feel the greatest impact. The injustice was stark. The US is a country with a population of less than 5% of the world's population and consumes 25% of the world's resources, while blocking Cuba from basic amenities and basic things they need to live. I think the last thing I want to share is there's a dominant narrative in the US referring to other countries as undeveloped, or saying that the politics and the history of other countries are just too complex for us to understand. In our time there, we saw really clearly the direct line from the illegal blockade to the impact of every part of Cuban life. Thank you.
My name is Benjamin Mackay. I'm the executive director and the founder of the African American Registry. Registry is a nonprofit education organization that's 25 years old this summer. And what we do is we work through the African and African diaspora experience in classroom education by supplementing existing curriculum, both on a national and a state level up in Minneapolis, where we're housed. And we also work with community programs as well. Our community programs are called the Street Team. And for the last 5 years, we've shifted our focus from our street team, which has been revolving around, shall we say, areas in the United States, to something more international. And that's what brought us to the delegation with Witness for Peace and Solidarity. In the last 5 years, we have been to Brazil, we have been to Ireland, we've been to Sweden, and we've been to Ghana. And what we do when we go to these places under the Street Team International banner is we look for people of African descent where they live. And we focus on the issues that are existent for them by virtue of where they live. An example of that, when we were in Accra and Cape Coast, Ghana, the theme was Pan-Africanism in the 21st century. When we were in Ireland, it was asylum seekers and immigrants from the continent of Africa who have come to the island of Ireland and how they are faring. In Sweden, it was revolving around what is it to be Swedish, but be a second or third generation Somali or Ethiopian person living in Uppsala or with what Witness for Peace and Solidarity was doing. And two of the three things that were on the agenda fit what we wanted to come across with. We're very interested in the Afro-Cuban community, how they are faring, what is different for them, what is similar for them, put up against the general Cuban community. We also wanted to look at it from a political standpoint and from a relationship that Afro-Cubans have with African Americans and their perspectives. Now, what makes the Street Team International a little different is when we go to these areas and we talk to people, we interview them, mainly academics, elders, and young people, tackle the various issues that we have with about half a dozen fixed questions that they see in advance and make a decision to sit down with our camera. And that's exactly what we did when we were in Havana and Matanza earlier this summer. We interviewed 5 people, and each interview lasted about 23 minutes apiece. As I said, about a half a dozen questions that revolved around feminism, Afro-Cuban, intersection-based views of themselves, also a look at agriculture and how some of the agribusiness people were or were not using methodology that came from the continent through the transatlantic slave trade or not. We also wanted to find Afro-Cuban perspectives on the future in politics. You know, is it possible to dream of an Afro-Cuban president in Cuba or not? And also look at post-revolution status of Afro-Cubans as well. As I said, we interviewed 5 people, and what Felipe is going to play for you is a short video that is about 1.5 minutes long that features 2 of the 5 people that we interviewed with a response that has to do with how they see themselves and how they see others. The questions will be in the video, so I'll just let Felipe take it away.
What do you enjoy the most about the Afro-Cuban community?
Para mí, lo diversa que es. Yo creo que Cuba es uno de esos países en los que es difícil encontrar homogeneidad en cualquiera de los grupos poblacionales que quieras analizar o estudiar. Pero en el caso de la población negra en Cuba, a mí lo que más me gusta es su diversidad. Cómo las personas ponen toda esa riqueza cultural, tradicional, en medio de lo que es el pueblo negro en Cuba. Eso es una de las cosas que más me marcan.
If you could change one thing about the Afro-Cuban people, what would it be?
Yo primero cambiaría que las personas negras en Cuba trabajemos por tener una autoestima más saludable. Porque siento que todavía pesa mucho sobre el pueblo negro en Cuba lo que pudo haber sido el flagelo del racismo. Y si es una cosa que queremos eliminar, también en nuestra conciencia tenemos que sentirnos personas dignas. Y creo que también por el tipo de mujer que soy, cambiaría que las mujeres negras reconozcamos y presumamos más la belleza que tienen las mujeres negras.
Is there anything that we have not touched on that you wish to tell us?
Bueno, sí. Creo que cuando hablamos de racialidad y del afrocubano en Cuba, creo que faltaría un tema importante y es la visibilización. La visibilidad de lo que somos, de la comunidad que somos, de los rasgos que tenemos, de nuestra cultura, de nuestra identidad, de nuestra música, de nuestras maneras y de lo orgulloso que somos. Creo que eso faltó, lo orgulloso que somos los afrodescendientes en Cuba.
Is that it was actually capitalized in what Ismani said in the last half of that video, and that was about the visibility of the Afro-Cuban people going forward. That is something that plays into maybe one of the differences that people of African descent, no matter where we are, go through, and that is that we either have bought into not being a part of the dominant culture, whether that be Sweden, whether that be America, whether that be Brazil, wherever, to the point where our self-esteem gets challenged a lot, and it takes a certain kind of person to be able to overcome that piece on a daily basis and pass that down to their children and others going forward. I also found that doing this work the way we do it, by going to the places where these people of African descent live, it creates a comfort zone where they can maybe be themselves more than if they were to come to America for a visit or for school or for something along those lines. So there's a certain relaxation that we find, and I'm finding it more and more as I go through editing the various videos that we have, which will be up probably maybe after November on our Street Team International. I'll certainly let Witness for Peace and Solidarity and all of you know where you can find it.
All right, thank you so much, Sierra, Ashley, and Ben for opening your experience and your time. And now it's time for questions. So